Hello and welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick, and I'm here today with a really great friend of mine. Ray is someone who I've known for the last year and a half or so, or at least I'd heard of the last year and a half or so. Ray J. Green, from throwing raves to working at Napster, selling two businesses, leading national small and mid-sized business sales at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and becoming CEO of a private equity-backed company before he was 40, and then walking away from it all and moving his family to a remote Mexican beach to chart a new course. He has had some adventure. Over the course of the last few years, he's freelanced as a contract executive for investor groups. He's done fractional sales and exec management for businesses. He started building an online presence, and as a result, he's had the opportunity to work with superstars like Dan Martell from the SaaS Academy, Robin Robbins from Technology Marketing Toolkit, and others building high-performance sales and marketing engines. Drawing on all his experience online and offline, he founded Repeatable Revenue to help other entrepreneurs and founders of service businesses build and scale their businesses up to $1 million, remove themselves from the process after that, and then scale to $10 million and more with repeatable sales and marketing. He's also someone that I have hired to coach. A lot of times people ask me who I work with because I do believe that we can all benefit from getting coached by others. And I'm happy to say that I've hired Ray to do some work with me as a coach to help me with regards to my business models. And he's terrific. His skills and his knowledge and his ability to be able to make really good, insightful judgments and intuitions about the right direction to go in. So thank you so much, Ray. Great to have you here for my podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thanks, Owen. Man, I'm excited to jump into this and jam on the podcast.
So you are talking to us from Cabo, and I would love to know more about what made you make that decision. But first, could you give us just a really brief, obviously I gave the bio there. Could you give us a bit of a brief exploration of the story of what got you to here?
Yeah, it's been an unusual journey, right? Like I started as an entrepreneur and then went into corporate and then left corporate. So I started, like you mentioned, I started throwing rave. That was my first real business. And that spun out legitimately. Like we actually tax IDs and all that shit. And I ended up representing DJs like worldwide. And so that we spun that up into a legitimate business and sold that. And that's what led to following my passion. The next thing, I thought I loved politics, but that's what got me to the chamber. And then 15 years of that, you realize I really don't like politics. So
it took you 15 years to realize.
No.
I'm sorry, but even I know it. Like I've met you, I've spent some time with you. I can't imagine you in the political world. Not that you wouldn't be able to be great at it, but it's just in terms of your thing. And I like, especially in America, like there's no way. So yeah, 15 years, that's quite a while to have that realization.
Well, the funny thing is I took a sales job. And when I took the sales job, I hated sales. Like my experience with sales up to that point had been like hawking knockoff perfumes in California parking lots and selling long distance as a telemarketer, right? So I didn't like sales, but it was the only job open at the chamber. And I said, well, fuck it. Like I can figure this out. But I fully intended on starting in sales and getting a law degree and becoming a lobbyist. Like that's what I started thinking. 15 years later, couldn't stand politics, but loved sales. And that's what happened. What kept me there was not the politics. And the chamber, by the way, is like, it's a great institution. I'm proud to be alumni. I mean, incredible network. I got a ton of development. They threw a lot of resources at me. That's where like my trajectory of my career. So I owe a lot to the chamber, but I still just didn't love politics. So I had a lot of great experience with building sales teams, turning around sales divisions, learning direct mail, phone sales, field sales, digital sales, like all kinds of stuff. So was there for 15, 16 years, ended up getting my MBA. I kind of plateaued there. I plateaued because the next move for me would have been to DC. And at this point, I didn't want to go to DC. And as you can see, like I'm wearing a tank top, but I've been this way for a long time. I've been like, one of the first things we did when I got promoted into manager was it was like basically suit and tie environment. And we just like abolished the fucking dress code. We rolled in ping pong tables. We like half the team was let go in like short order. We rebuilt a culture on core values. And so we had this kind of unorthodox, really cool, high performing sales team. And that's what we did. Like it was because it was all of that was outside of DC. So that was in Dallas. And so I was able to basically build this business as an autonomous business unit with the culture and everything that I wanted to. I was the head of a business unit. And that's why I stayed. I mean, it was just a great organization with a great team, but I didn't want to go to DC. So I got my MBA and I said, I think I want to go into private equity. Like that was my next goal. And I networked my way into private equity over the course of a couple of years while doing business school. And this time, it only took me like 2 years to figure out I didn't like private equity either. Like it was just like going from being able to build cultures and think about the long term and shit like that to running a business from a spreadsheet and thinking of it purely in terms of EBITDA, and things like culture don't have a line item on the balance sheet. And I just clashed with the board. I mean, it was a shitty business. It was over levered, but I also just didn't see things the same way as the board did. So that led to some friction, obviously, and we parted ways. And right around that time was when I said, I think Cabo seems like a good destination to go try the next thing.
So you just went and you decided, right, let's go to Mexico and let's live in Mexico. How difficult was it to get settled? I mean, I can only imagine. I know what it's like to have moved from Ireland to the States. How difficult was it, or how easy was it, or what was the process like from moving your main residence to Mexico?
So the process, the initiating, like the decision to do it was a lot easier because I had a friend who was actually working with me at this PE backed company, and he was running the field sales team. He was doing it remotely and he was already down here. And we'd worked together at the chamber, we'd worked together at another job. So I knew he was really good. And when I called him and said, hey, can you help me build this team? He said, dude, I'm going to Baja. And I said, well, he's good enough. Can you run it from Baja? So he had been down there for a year. And as things kind of came to a head at the company that I was running, I needed a break. So the way that this whole thing played out was I was kind of burnt out. I told my wife, like she was burnt out along with me. And we said, we're going to go on vacation to Baja. And so we were going to come down and kind of mix business with pleasure, connect on the sales stuff, all that shit in Baja. And we got down here, man, we just fell in love with it. Like we were supposed to stay 3 weeks. We ended up staying 5. And we had our kids were 2 and 3 at the time, 2 and 4. And we went back to Dallas just long enough, like 30 days. And we packed up our shit. We put it in storage. We put our house on the market to rent. We turned in cars. And it was about 30 days later, we were back in Baja, basically full time. And we said, we'll just figure it out. And the most difficult part of the process, I would say, is just we did it all legally. Like, so we got the residency and a lot of that stuff logistically, trying to figure that out. Thankfully, my wife handled most of that shit, but it really wasn't. I mean, what the process and the decision was very spontaneous for us, which was very different for us too, because up to that point, man, almost everything had been mapped out. Like I'm very methodical. We had our spreadsheeting our stuff, just our life. Like I'm the kind of person, no bullshit, when I was trying to pick where to go to school for business school, I did like a weighted decision model, like on a spreadsheet. Like, okay, let me factor in the sports teams. Let me factor in these things. So deciding like on a whim, fuck it, let's leave the country with our kids. The people were surprised. And I think we surprised ourselves looking back.
And is your company then American, or is it a Mexican company? Like, how did you do that? Did you keep your company? Had you the company before you moved to Mexico, or what?
Yeah, it's an American company in Texas. So there's some tax advantages to the way that we're structured. So I'm an employee of my company, which is an American company based in the States.
I get you. And so tell us this, your main, I suppose, focus a lot of times, or at least one of your main focuses, let's just say, Ray, is helping service providers create a productized service. So in order to be able to scale your business, if you're a coach or if you're an expert in some area, it's about helping translate that, or a consultant, for example, helping translate that consultancy skill, coaching skill into something that becomes able to run without you or with you in terms of minimal. Could you talk a little bit around what you mean by productized service and why you decided to help so many folks with that particular goal?
Yeah. So when I say productized service, imagine there's a continuum. On one side of the continuum is a completely 100% productized thing, like a digital product. Think like a course or something like that. And on the other end of the continuum, you have completely bespoke services, meaning every company I talk to is a completely new project for me. And I've got to go in and figure it out and do new proposals, and they get different types of services. And like, I'm still leveraging a lot of my expertise, but every project is a little bit different. Right. And so I think of productizing as you get to pick where you want to sit on this continuum. But I think the reason I focus on it a lot is because it's really easy to get stuck in your business when you are in many ways the product, right? When you're taking your expertise and you're selling them as a consultant, as a coach, as a fractional executive, or whatever it is, when you're selling your expertise, it's very easy for you to become the center of everything in your business. And that's a challenge. Like that actually, for me, when I started out, it led to me not liking the business that I was creating. Like when I got down to Baja, I basically said, I've got some good experience. I've got some good contacts. I've built up this network. I should be able to go do some consulting. And I went out and I just quickly found out when I had entirely bespoke services, it was really tough to market myself. It was really tough to sell what it is I do. Like people would say, well, what do you do? And I'd be like, well, a little of this and a little of that. And I know marketing and I'm good at leadership and blah, blah, blah. And I just found that that's a tough road, like for the long haul. So the more that you productize and the more that you systematize and offer, like the way that you're going to deliver your services, the easier they are to market. And the easier that they are to market, the easier they are to sell, the easier it is for you to get premiums, the easier it is for you to scale, the easier it is for you to hire people to help you. So I took like on that one end of the continuum that was bespoke, and I just started moving it like across to the other end. And I found that the more that I moved it towards productizing, and I wasn't going to necessarily go all the way and just sell courses online, but the more that I moved my services more towards like the center of that and systematize some of those things, I could take on more clients. I could market to get better clients. I was getting better rates. It was easier for me to look at the business and say, I need to hire here. Whereas as a Swiss Army knife, as a person solving all kinds of problems, who do I go hire? Like, it's very difficult to find somebody else with that skill set. So that was the thinking behind it. And what led to really turning it into a business was as I was doing fractional work when I started, I was posting about it on LinkedIn a lot. And I was posting about some client work that I was doing, and people started noticing the success, like the marketing was working. And so I was getting more inbound opportunities, but I was also getting a lot of people that were trying to do the same thing. They were like, hey, how are you doing this? Where do you live again? How does that work? Like, and that's when I created a course that said, hey, here's how to basically get started with some of this. And the number of people that were reaching out, asking me to teach them how to do it increased. And I said, well, shit, I'll make that an offer. I'll start teaching people how to systematize their business from their expertise so that they can generate more revenue. And if they want to, really turn it into a business, like start to extract themselves from that process where they're not at the source of everything that needs to be done.
So we heard about you from somebody who had been on and worked with you and got coached by you, who was really successful now as a result. As a result of his recommendation, we decided to go and got the opportunity to work with you, got the opportunity to go to Cabo and to see you there and to be part of the mastermind and whatnot. One of the most interesting parts, I think, of the process that you take people through is the very beginning. You have what you call your vision founder fit. And you also have another version that I know that you've got from the book, Vivid Visions, right? But the nature of it is to be able to be very clear about where you want to go. And that's something that I've done many times at a lot of different vision exercises. What I loved about this one, which was a little different than anything before, and this is something also I've heard Justin Welsh talk about, which is the nature of what gives you energy and what takes energy away from you. I just love the way that that was described, because I think often when we see vision, we think in terms of, okay, what would you be doing? Where would you be doing it? What would you have? What's your lifestyle look like? But it's very much focused in the way I feel about it. It's very much focused on the world as opposed to how we feel. When you ask that question, what is it in your future? If you imagine the future trajectory that you want to be on, what is it that gives you energy? What takes your energy away? That really helped me to be able to figure out, oh, this is the direction I want to go in. Because if I go in this direction, I'm then engaging the kind of things that give me more energy. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of a vision, Ray, and the importance of getting that clear before you start to work through your customer profile avatar or the ICP or your USP or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, of course, man. And I'm glad you got a lot out of it. So did I. Like it's a huge part of the process for me. And there's two things in that. I think one is the importance of the vision, and the importance of the vision for so many people that are starting out selling their services, selling their expertise, or building a business. They get into a reactionary mode, right? Like they're looking for clients, and everyone that's willing to hire them becomes a prospect. Like, oh, hey, they have a wallet and a checkbook. They have a checkbook. They're willing to hire me. And so you start bending what you do and what you offer and what your business is based on the people that are willing to pay you. And so you end up in a place that you're just reacting to what the market tells you because you're not actively moving towards a destination. Right. And I look at it and I say, if you can at least get relatively clear on what it is you want to build, then what it allows you to do is say no to the wrong things and say yes to the right things. And it's just like Google Maps. You punch in the destination, you can get a route. And the more accurate the destination, the more dialed in that is, the better the roadmap is going to be for you. And the easier you're going to be able to adjust to things that pop up that you may not necessarily, hey, there's a roadblock or there's traffic over here. There's something you can adjust, but you still know where you're going. Like the destination is still pretty clear and you can come up with a number of ways to get there. So to me, that's the importance of the vision. The energy piece is the more I do this, the more solopreneurs I meet that are unsatisfied. Like I talk to a lot of solopreneurs. They went and they started this business, whether it's a business or just them. They started this business to escape shit that they didn't like in corporate, right? Or shitty bosses or feeling like garbage or feeling unfulfilled and all these things. So they say, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this on my own. And then they get out there and they end up feeling the same way. And it's because when you're in that reactionary mode, you're not proactively, there's not a decision-making filter that ensures that you're saying yes to the things that give you energy and no to the things that don't. And if you're just saying yes to whoever is available in front of you as a prospective client, that is no way to build a business that you're certainly going to be fulfilled in. Right. So let's separate from the business. Like the important part about Vision Founder Fit to me is you separate yourself from the actual business and you say, you as a person, you as a founder, you as like, what is it that you want this business to deliver? Like, what are the things? Why are you starting this thing? What is it that gives you energy? What is going to make you feel fulfilled? What is going to make you happy? Those things. All right. As a person, Owen, now we say, what needs to be true of the business to make that happen? Right. Because there are an infinite number of business models. You could build courses online. You could do certifications. You could do consulting. You could do coaching. You could do one-to-one coaching. You could do one-to-many coaching. I mean, the list is infinite. And that's what screws people up is they get out there and like, what am I doing? And so the offer changes and the brand changes and the focus changes and it's constantly pivoting. And to me, that's the absence of a vision. And it's the absence of knowing what do I want to say yes and no to. And the right tool to me becomes a decision-making filter for all the other things that you mentioned, like who your target market's going to be, what makes you different, like what are you actually selling?
And let me ask you this, Ray. So if there's a few things you want to do, right? So right now at the moment in my business, I'm doing a lot of, as you know, I'm doing a lot of different things, right? I've got a lot of hats on. And on the one hand, I've too many hats on and the hats are falling off. There's none of them fit my head perfectly. But on the other hand, the challenge with it is that I don't just want to do one thing. So for example, there might be, let's say, 3 different things that I would like to do. Is there room in the model in terms of, is it a case where you recommend, look, you need to stop messing about, you need to double down on one area and lean into it and make that work? Or is it plausible or possible from your perspective for somebody like myself that likes to I don't just like to do, let's say, training or keynote speaking. I also want to do a little bit of coaching. I definitely want to do the online stuff. So is there room to do that? Was that something you'd recommend, or would you suggest sort of focus, focus, focus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think there's a single right answer. Generally speaking, it's take one offer to one market until you're at, call it 1 million, right? Like you want to, like generally speaking, more focus, more concentration is going to get you to the destination faster. But I think that there's some of us, myself included, one thing could get boring. And, we just talked about what gives you energy, what drains your energy. And if one of the things that gives you energy is being curious and doing other things, then you've got to account for that. That has to be part of your vision founder fit. And in that case, what I would say is what's most important is, can you create an environment where those three things stack on top of each other, right? Instead of split your focus. In other words, I've used the example sometimes training for a marathon and training to be a power lifter at the same time. Those two things don't work well together, right? Like they're two very different exercises, two very different nutrition plans, two very different outcomes. And so if you do both of those things, you're probably not going to do either of them particularly well. But that's different than if you train to do a marathon and then you train to do the hotter than hell bike for 100 miles. And then you train to do something. Now you're starting to put together a triathlon, right? Those things start to add to each other. So you're stacking. Training for the marathon helped you move towards the other thing, right? And that's how I would look at those things. Is there an opportunity to ensure that the different focuses that you're going to have are going to add to each other instead of split the difference? And the other thing is, I think for me, it's intentionality. Like if you are intentionally focused on three things and you know what they are, you're able to time block those things accordingly. Cool. What happens for most of us is we try to do three things. We think that we're going to be organized and disciplined at focusing. And what usually happens is we aren't. And it ends up being a shit show. If you're capable of it, then cool. I'm not. Like I've got to focus on something for a period of time. I've convinced myself enough times that I could do multiple things, and I've tried and I just don't do them particularly well.
So with that in mind, something you do particularly well and something that I'm learning from you is systems. And this is something that obviously we heard on the mastermind, the legend himself, who's also on the podcast, Marcus Chan, who's like a demon with regards to systems. I mean, that guy has a system for absolutely everything. Incredible stuff. Amazing guy. From your own perspective, and this is something I've talked to you about before, but I'd love you to share what are some of the most important things that, first of all, why are systems so important? I suppose briefly, but more than that, what are some things that you would suggest or recommend people do to get better at setting up systems? I'm one of these people that I'm working really hard to try to become more systematic, and I'm very good with fine detail, actually. I just have a very chaotic brain, even though I love structure. So I'm a wannabe systems legend, and yet I'm an amateur currently. So what advice would you have for me or anyone out there that's looking to become a super systems show person?
Well, I think we can safely say I'm no Marcus Chan. Like that he really is a demon. That was a great session. And he made me feel very inferior about my own systems. Like, damn, dude, he's got, I mean, completely scorecard for everything. I mean, to me, the power of systems is consistency, measurability, the ability to improve, right? And when you have those things, think of it, whether it's in your life or in your business. I'll focus primarily on the business. When you have those things in your business, that's what allows you to create headspace. That's what's going to ultimately make you enjoy your business more, because you can systematize the things, like the tedious stuff, like the minutia, the things that you don't necessarily want to. But on the big things, you can also make sure that those things are being done consistently, right? It's also what gives you have the right systems in place and the right processes in place. Now I can start to hire. Now I can start to automate. Now I can start to delegate these things. And until you find a way to get a result consistently, then it's going to be very difficult to plug someone else in. I used to know a buddy of mine is one of the best natural charismatic salespeople I have ever seen in my life. And for any product, like across industries, he's just good. But as many times as I've challenged him, dude, if you could figure out why you were so successful and teach other people to do it, you would amplify the impact that you have. But if you don't systematize it, then you can't teach it, then you can't delegate it, then you can't automate it, you can't do anything else. So to me, that's the power of it. The advice, like the best advice I have, is learning to be okay with it being messy. Like usually when we think of systems, We think we're going to get like this linear step by step thing. And once we get the right system, everything's going to be perfect. And eventually it probably will. But almost every system at the beginning is messy. Like it is because you're just getting some baselines. Like you've got to iterate, you've got to optimize, you've got to tweak. And to do that, you've got to run it imperfectly a whole lot of times until you can figure out what needs to be improved. And for me, I spent a lot of time on like the content management system, right? And the couple of times I tried to get somebody on my team to take it over, it didn't work just right. And so we'd say, fuck it. Like, all right, never mind. But you know what? That's just part of the process. Part of the process is it might suck, might be imperfect. But now that it's a system, you can figure out which knobs you need to turn and which buttons you need to push to make it better and continue making it better and continue making it better. And you look at systems after they've been in motion for years, like what Marcus was telling us about. When you hear those things, you go, it's overwhelming. You go, oh my God. But every one of those systems started smaller and started imperfectly. But when you run them effectively over time, you end up with this thing that years down the road, people go, God, how'd you ever do that? Well,
So on that, Ray, what is your normal, you could just give us a day in the life in terms of, let's say, a content day. Like, how do you organize your week from a content perspective when you're creating content? Could you just share how you think about creating content from a Monday to Friday or Saturday or whatever?
yeah, for me, it's very difficult for me to create much content in small time blocks. So basically everything after the coaching call on Friday, everything is blocked. And that's my content day. And I have a checklist. Like I know every week I have to be doing X number of things. Like I know what the leading indicators are. I know how many LinkedIn posts I've got to write. I know how many videos I've got to create. And so I'll check those things out. And I use Friday, like a big, huge time block of Friday to do that. What I'm doing throughout the week though, is I'm capturing ideas. So I use Notion for our content management system. And I've got a column that's in that system that's just ideas. And anytime I get anything, like, you know what? I jot it down and it goes into that idea category. So when I go to sit down Friday, I have things that are halfway done. I have things that are maybe I've got at least a couple sparks. So I'm not starting with like a completely blank page. So that's one thing that helps me. The other thing I'll tell you is that's helped amplify this or accelerate it is AI. Like sitting down and at the beginning of my time block, having a couple conversations with Chat GPT or something like that, like to get some, like, hey, I've got these ideas to get some structure. Very rarely is Chat GPT capable of giving me content that I could use, but it's very capable of getting me to think. And what used to like be an intimidating blank page, I now have ideas that I've captured throughout the week. And I've got kind of a thought partner that when I get stuck writing, I can ask a question or, hey, can you give me a metaphor for this or whatever it is? So usually one big time block. And then the system is what takes care of the rest. So we have one full-time social media person and his job is basically taking everything that I crank out on Friday and turning it into everything else. So, all right, here's a kind of a shitty recording of Ray stuff. It's 30 minutes of video, but it's going to be a 10-minute YouTube video. Cool. Like, but he's going to knock that out. Here's some drafts of the LinkedIn posts. He's going to clean those up and he's going to schedule them into the system and he's going to update the system that says all these things are scheduled. And that's where like the underlying tech kind of helps us organize.
And do you check that? Do you have a certain time during the week where you double check everything that goes out before it goes out, or do you trust it will? And what do you do?
Good question. At the beginning, yes. But as you get to know somebody when you're communicating, the feedback loop. So an important part of systems thinking is the feedback loop, right? If you have a content system or somebody helping you, I cannot emphasize how much context is when you give feedback. Like when you're giving feedback to somebody, if you explain to them why, like instead of saying, hey, can you delete this space? Hey, I like to leave this space open because it's white space and the white space helps makes it easier to read. Now, Angela or whoever on your team is says, okay, I now get that. So you're teaching them as you go. So you have to edit and be involved less and less and less over time. So yeah, I'm still involved in it. Like I still review anything that's going to go out on YouTube. Like there's a column for Ray review and I'll look at it before, but it's a lot less than it was 3 months ago.
And what other elements, you mentioned Notion, which is wonderful. And you mentioned, well, ChatGPT, I suppose. What other things are in your tech stack that you would use that you would recommend?
Well, one thing about like the tech stack is somebody told me a long time ago, he with the fewest tools wins. So trying to keep it as minimalist as possible. So there are things that I use Notion for that Notion isn't the best for. Like this content management system, I think if I built it in a different platform, it might be easier. Marcus, we mentioned him earlier, he uses ClickUp, but I want fewer tools. I want to consolidate it. So a couple of the tools that I use a lot, you mentioned Notion. Descript is a godsend for on video for a couple of reasons. One, I'm in Mexico, so everything's tile and concrete. So like no matter where I record this house, there's echo, and it's got some options in there for like studio sound, which just like immediately makes your shit sound good. But also the ability to edit at a really high level, because you can in Descript you can edit a video by editing the transcript. So I can just delete a paragraph and it deletes that section from the video. That makes it much easier to send over to somebody that's helping you with social media. Cause I now spend, after I do the recording, I spend 5 minutes at least getting it like, cause I can just delete text. Like I know that part sucked. So Descript is a big one. We use Asana for project management, task management, things like that. But I would say those are probably the ones I'm in most.
Well, we've got a quick fire round coming up, if that's okay, Ray. Just like bullet point questions. Before
Okay.
we do that, one final question, which is, who are some of the thought leaders that you follow that you recommend that you would say people should check out their stuff, maybe on LinkedIn or their blogs or books or whatever?
Well, you mentioned, I mean, a couple, like, I mean, Marcus is a friend of mine. Justin Welsh, you'd mentioned him. He's a good buddy of mine. I think those are a couple on LinkedIn. I like to listen to people that have completely different styles. So like Alex Formosi, for example, he drops a ton of really, really high quality content. And I mean, very, very different audience, but he's really solid. Who else? I don't know. And I've tried to limit my inputs. It kind of confuses my brain, like in terms of content. So I find myself following fewer and fewer on like the social media sphere and getting back into long form books and podcasts and shit like that. I've been trying to carve my time on social media down and down as I go.
And I also know that you're a big fan of Stoic philosophy, Ryan Holiday's books and whatnot. The Daily Stoic is a part of your life as well, I believe. Yeah, I also recognize the Bill Campbell book, the Trillion Coach there behind you. So
Yeah. Well, there's a interesting story about Ryan Holiday's book is when I started consulting down here in Cabo, the first year, I didn't love it. Like part of why I teach the business the way that I do today is because I know how easy it is to fall into a trap of chasing income and chasing clients and having a business that you don't end up loving. And there was a point that I was about a year in, maybe 18 months, and I was reading Ryan Holiday's Stillness is the Key. And there's a part in that book, paraphrasing, that he said, if you aren't taking the time to think deeply about your business, then who is? And I said, shit. And I was just so busy, but I wasn't loving it, but I was busy. And I decided that hit me really hard. So I went and basically locked myself in the office. I was renting a separate office at the time. I locked myself in the office, no Wi-Fi, no computer. And I said, I'm going to think, like, why am I doing this? What am I building? What the fuck? Like, why am I so frustrated? Why am I overwhelmed? I'm living on a beach. I don't have a boss. Like, where am I going to go with this thing? And I don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but like the first hour is really kind of weird, like almost compulsively reaching for your phone or like tech or something. But you get to a point where like the level of thought just gets deeper, and 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And I walked out and I still have it in my journal. And I sat down and I said, there are a few things that I'm really adamant that I want to do, that I want to build. And one of them was I want to create quality content. One of them was because I was going back and forth on whether I should go back to the States. One of them was I'm not going back. I'm staying remote and location independent. One of them was I'm going to get to a point very soon where I'm going to pick the clients that I want to work with. And so I picked these, but that came from a solo session after reading Ryan's book and taking it kind of literally. And that's actually the kind of the core of Vision Founder Fit today too.
Fantastic. Great to hear that, Ray. You know, it was so wonderful hanging out with you and the rest of the great group you brought together there. That was fantastic. And again, thanks for letting me share some of my stuff about belief leadership and whatnot with the group.
It was awesome.
Wonderful getting the kind of the interaction there and getting their perspectives on a different angle or a different approach.
Yeah. Well, your session was awesome. And if you don't mind me sharing, like the fact that you delivered it like you were in pain, like, and I couldn't even tell, like in your session was the one we talked about for days. My wife said, I wasn't even there. And I feel like I was there. Cause I talked about it so much. It was Thank you for doing it. No
Oh,
bullshit.
of course. I had, for anyone who's listening, I had the worst headache I think I've ever had, or at least had in years. I was in agony all day. And I had a couple of virtual sessions to deliver as well. It was some day, but it just goes to show, despite the fact I was in real pain all day, I loved being there. I got a lot from it. So we'll get into the final round, which is the break, I suppose, the quick fire round, right? Favorite movie,
Top Gun.
favorite author,
Greg McEwen.
favorite book,
Essentialism.
favorite artist,
Painting
painter,
or music?
painter,
Painter. Mario.
favorite musician,
Favorite musician? Armin van Buuren.
favorite philosopher,
Ooh, Seneca.
favorite TV series.
It's a tie between How I Met Your Mother and Friends.
If you could have any superpower, which one would you?
Oh, if I could have any superpower, it would be to read people's minds.
If you could travel anywhere, past, present, or future, where would you go?
I would go to the future in 100 years just to see what this next version or this next thing of AI and web stuff is doing out of curiosity.
If you could live anywhere besides Cabo, where would you live?
Anywhere besides Cabo, I would live somewhere in Europe. I grew up in Germany. I was born in Japan, grew up in Germany. So I think going back to Europe, like as an adult and with more respect, I'd like to do that again.
If you could have any other career besides what you're doing, what would you do?
Any other career? Nothing, man. If I want another career, I'm going to make it.
Love it. Finally, one piece of advice from the world, if you were to give a sentence or two for the rest of the world to hear, what would your message be?
My message would be what you think is a really big deal today in 10 years won't be. And if we get to the end of this, we're going to realize that it all worked out. Like it was all okay. It was fine. Like, so the small things today probably aren't nearly as big. And if you can keep that perspective, it helps bring in the stoicism.
Love it. If people want to find out more, which I'm sure they will, Ray, where should they go?
RayJGreen.com, and that has all the links to everything else.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's been a pleasure as always. Love chatting with you. Got a lot of value from this, as I always do. And again, very much appreciate you, my friend.
Thanks, brother. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.